Everyone's taste is a little bit different. We all don't have to like our backs the same way. Heck, maybe you like those sexy athletic backs. Maybe you like a big back that can take a pounding. Or maybe you're the type that loves a back that can catch some balls. Ugh, probably should have clarified. We're talking about running backs. Hey, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Sorry about that PG-13 opening there. Hopefully you weren't listening with your kids around, or they're probably going to be asking you some questions that you don't want to answer right now. But whatever it may be, let's jump into the information that we're going to be talking about in this episode today. And let's talk about some late round running back sleepers that you should be keeping on your draft board the closer you get to your draft this season. Now, before we talk about the running backs, just a reminder, the 2020 Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide is currently available for pre-order, $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com. Tons of information, 300 plus player profiles, exclusive content that you won't be able to get in any other draft guide, and of course, that hashtag Hellafire fantasy football analysis you've come to expect from this channel. Without further ado, let's jump into it and let's talk about these running backs for 2020. All right, my first running back is one that I mentioned quite a bit last season until Carlos Hyde showed up and had to ruin all of it. But I just want to bring him up again, and that's going to be Duke Johnson from the Houston Texans. Right now, he's got an ADP of 153. So you're going to be able to get him as the running back 52 off the board. Now, stick with me here for just a second and let me explain why that is. Again, Carlos Hyde ruined it last year. He ended up coming in late after Duke Johnson had already joined the team and just had a grasp on that starting running back role. 1,070 yards on 245 carries. Bill O'Brien really leaned on him. However, now we've got David Johnson in that lead role with Duke Johnson as kind of that backup pass catching back. However, David Johnson's a much better pass catcher than what Carlos Hyde was. So that could end up ruining some things as well. However, the reason that we're targeting Duke Johnson is a late round pick, a guy that maybe we stash to see what happens, is because of David Johnson. I mean, over his last 29 games, 3.65 yards per carry. That dude is looking slower than my grandma headed up to the winner's table after bingo, okay? He did not look good last year towards the end of the season. Now, he could be just fine. He could bounce back. He could look like the David Johnson of old. But if for some reason he doesn't, or he gets hurt, or whatever it may be, we want to keep Duke Johnson in mind because maybe he finally gets that lead back role if David Johnson goes down for a while. Some of those outlying statistics you got to keep an eye on. A 94.5 elusiveness rating through Pro Football Focus. That was the third highest of any running back last year. 3.64 yards after contact per attempt. Fourth highest. Okay, so after he gets hit, the dude keeps going. 4.9 yards per carry, 11th highest. Also in the passing game, he had a 3.3 average depth of target. That was the third highest of any running back. So he's a running back that's not just taking those passes in the backfield. He's a guy that's running some routes as well. And he had 9.3 yards per, he had 9.3 yards per reception. So he was averaging about 6 yards after the catch. So he's also a guy he's doing a little bit of moving and shifting around with the ball after he touches it. Again, I've talked about that a lot with these running backs. What do they do after they get the ball in their hands? Duke Johnson is a guy that could be really, really good if he were to get that type of volume. Also, 205 air yards last year, the second most of running backs. That kind of goes back to that average depth of target. He is a guy that isn't just taking those swing passes out in the flat. He isn't taking those screen passes. He's a guy that's going out there, going one-on-one, probably with a linebacker, maybe a slot corner running around out there, and he's winning those matchups. But even his red zone usage in the passing game last year, 17 red zone targets, which was third, 10 red zone receptions, which was fifth, again, among running backs, and then a 27.4% red zone target share that was second for running backs as well. So again, even though Bill O'Brien didn't give him that workload that we would have liked to see. And trust me, when it comes to Duke Johnson, I think if he were to ever get the workload, then at that point, I think we're going to see a great athlete that puts together a fantastic season. But again, this is not a guy that we're drafting to be a starter right away. He's a guy towards the very end of our draft that we're going to take a flyer on because, again, if something happens to David Johnson, we got to have a guy in our back pocket ready to go, and that could end up being Duke Johnson, okay? Not getting super excited for him unless we see something from David Johnson that concerns us. So that's running back number 1. My next running back that we need to take a look at, a guy that most of you at this point probably are going to try and take a shot at because his ADP is a little bit higher than Duke Johnson, Tarik Cohen. He's got an ADP of 120, running back 41 off the board. Now, just like Duke Johnson, Tarik Cohen is going to be a guy that we're looking at definitely in PPR leagues. Half PPR, yes, his ADP might come down a little bit. Standard leagues, we're not looking at Tarik Cohen in standard leagues because it really is going to be his workload in the passing game that will make him fantasy viable and a potential flex start every single week. Last year, he had 104 targets. That was second on the team and third among running backs. He had 79 receptions, also second on the team, fourth among running backs. 456 receiving yards, third on the team, and 10th among running backs. Now, let me break something down there for you real quick, and I'm just going to come off the slide, and I'm going to go right back to it in a second, but you probably want to see my face while I talk to you a little bit as well. Look at those numbers, okay? Lots of targets, lots of reception, crap receiving yards, okay? That's Mitchell Trubisky for you. That's teams not respecting the passing game and playing a little bit more up in the box. Tarik Cohen, after he gets the ball, he can't really do a whole lot with it because he's got defenders crashing down on him right away. So even though he's getting those targets and getting those receptions last year, he couldn't really do anything with it. And that's a concern. So does Nick Foles come in and change that this year? If he does, then this is another reason why we need to be taking a look at Cohen because of his slot performance. Now, before I move on to that, 11 red zone targets last year was tied for 7th among running backs as well. So another guy getting some looks in the red zone in the passing game. But his performance out in the slot, he is not a guy that is just going to line up in the backfield. 105 snaps out of the slot. That was first among all running backs last year, 42 more than the next closest, okay? So there wasn't anybody close to him in terms of lining up as a receiver as well. 29.1% of his snaps took place out in the slot, third most among running backs. He had 29 targets out there, first, 23 receptions, first, and then 114 receiving yards, second. So again, this is a guy that's not just going to line up in the backfield. So even if we believe David Montgomery could be a breakout this year, okay? If we believe that to be true, I don't think that hampers Tarik Cohen that much because Cohen could still go out and play in the slot. Anthony Miller could still go out there and play on the other side. I mean, and of course, Allen Robinson, but it's going to all rely on Nick Foles. Like I said with these stats, it's obvious that Mitchell Trubisky was not the type of quarterback that struck fear in opponents because they were all collapsing down onto the box. They were getting to the receivers right away on those short type passes like with Tarik Cohen, and that's an issue. If Nick Foles can stretch the field a little bit, if Allen Robinson can get going a little bit deeper this year, if Anthony Miller can kind of pick up where he left off this last season, then at that point things are getting a lot better because then Tarik Cohen could still see some of the same type of usage. However, those receiving yards could all of a sudden start piling up a lot quicker because he's going to have more room to maneuver and he's not going to have a guy on top of him right away. So again, these are two running backs that I'm taking a look at a little bit later on in drafts. Duke Johnson, a late round flyer, a guy that maybe if you own David Johnson, you grab Duke Johnson to go with him. Tarik Cohen is going to be a guy that could potentially have flex standalone value on his own if Nick Foles is the starting quarterback. So it's another thing to keep an eye on as well. If Mitchell Trubisky is the starting quarterback, that concerns me a lot because he's not good. Okay, he's just not good. Let's just face it. We're going to move on with it. Bears made a mistake. Trubisky's no good. Okay, but with Nick Foles, he could potentially be a little bit better and help stretch the field a little bit more, giving Cohen a lot more room to run around. So there you go. 2 more running backs for you to take a look at. We're going to have way more sleepers. We're going to talk about a lot more players. We're making these videos right now super quick. Everyone's got a lot going on. Maybe you are still quarantined. Maybe you're trying to get back to your normal life a little bit, but we're doing a little bit less of players for each video, make them a little bit quicker right now to get you back to life so you can do whatever else you need to do to get moving forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment below to let me know what's a running back sleeper you've taken a gamble on in the past that has worked out for you. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great one, Headliner Nation.